First thing you notice about the new one, yes, it looks like every other new bike that's just come out in the last couple of months. The drop seat stays, they're calling it like truncated airfoil, profile tubing, D-shaped tubing, whatever. Integrated cabling through the headset, and a more compliant D-shaped seat post. Now, D-shaped seat posts or skinny seat posts have been around on bikes like Canyon Aero, Scott Foil for ages, and they do work. They are very comfortable. Until you get to a point where they're so soft, they bob when you pedal, and then it becomes kind of annoying. So yeah, you have to tune it correctly, you have to tune the size and layout correctly to make it compliant enough for bumps, but not so squishy that when you're spinning a high cadence, you bounce up and down on the saddle, because no one wants that, because at the end of the day, it's a leaf spring without a damper. The integration, yeah, they've done the internal cabling on this one, and actually on the Cannondale, I actually quite like how they do it. It's quite simple, it just goes in front of the steerer tube in a completely separate cavity. So just like the System 6 Aero bike, they did the same thing. So they don't use any weird proprietary bearing sizes for the headset. It's still got a normal round steerer tube, 1 1/8 inch at the top. And so actually you can use a normal stem and bar setup on this bike if you want to, and actually a lot of the pros do, because they have their preferred stem length, they have their preferred bar shape, they'll put a normal stem on this bike. A lot of integrated aero bikes and these new integrated front end bikes, you're stuck with a proprietary stem and bars. If you don't like it, you're stuffed. And if you're someone like me who's, I'd say, a micro adjuster, very, very picky about bars, stem length, bar reach, bar drop, things like that, it's really handy if you can take your preferred bar and stick it on any bike. Of course, drop seat stays. Now people are saying that, you know, this is the only way to get the weight down, get the aero up, get the compliance up, and still fulfill the UCI boxes. So the UCI have a number of boxes in this manual where the boxes are laid out and the tubes have to fit in these shapes and the tubes have to be these proportions. I don't think that's quite true. I don't think that's like completely only way of doing it. I think it's more as if it's like keeping up with the Joneses. You know, S-Works did it with the tarmac, then BMC did it, and then it seems to be a well-proven formula, so everyone else is just basically copying. And you can still make sloping style top tube bikes like a giant TCR that will get the weight down, get the, you know, can be aerodynamic. And it's not the only way. I think that's just a bit of a cop-out, a bit of an excuse. But they've done it, and it does look like every other bike out there, and it's kind of a shame because the SuperSix was one of the most unique bikes in the peloton. It had very classic lines. Everyone knew the silhouette of a SuperSix. And the bike had a few bad things about it, like the BB30 bottom bracket and the lack of aerodynamics, the lack of compliance. And it kind of got away with it because it had this classic silhouette, and it was a SuperSix, and it was kind of unique, and it was not nostalgic, but it definitely stood out as being a SuperSix. And now it's lost that, okay? So it's going to have to nail everything now and be really good, and it'll have to redeem itself in every other feature because it's lost its classic kind of heritage, if you like. Tyre clearance has definitely got better. At the front, it's got even bigger through the fork, and they've actually made the fork longer, so you can fit, I think, a 30 or even bigger tyre in there. So they made the fork taller. The dropout to crown height has gone up. There's more tyre clearance in the back. So they're still using BB30A, which is 73mm wide bottom bracket. They've increased the tyre clearance between the chainstays, which was always the problem area on the SuperSix. But let's think about it. So if you keep the same bottom bracket width, but you increase the gap between the chainstays have to get thinner where they join the bottom bracket. It's just that's a rule, okay? And if they get thinner, they do lose bending stiffness. That's another fact. Now, the bike frame is kind of statically indeterminate. It's quite hard to know where the loads are coming from. You know, is the input of the load coming from the bottom bracket, or is it coming from the dropout, and which end is restrained? So which end do you make thick in terms of a bending beam? But if you thin down the chainstays where it joins the bottom bracket, you're losing a lot of bending stiffness there. So I still don't understand why all bikes don't use the wider 86.5mm Shimano shell, because that gives you more room for chainstay thickness and tyre clearance. You get the best of both worlds. If you have a narrow bottom bracket shell like a 68 or a 73, you lose bending stiffness from the chainstay if you want to increase tyre clearance. I mean, obviously this bike is going to be plenty stiff for anyone, because I guess they'll just have to add more carbon if the thickness of the tube goes down, but it's just, those little things just don't quite sit right with me. If you want tyre clearance and stiffness through the change days, use the widest bottom bracket shell you can get away with. And they're just clinging onto this proprietary BB30A. I think just need to do away with it. Stick to the bottom bracket, 86.5. One thing that really baffled me when I saw one bike on display, and I've seen it on display on the internet for sale, is the Ultegra high mod disc bike, which retails at about £6,500. Okay, £6,500 in the UK. And the cheek of Cannondale spec a 105 cassette on the back. Okay, it's calling it an Ultegra high mod bike, but for £6,500 you're getting a 105 cassette. I mean, look, 105 cassette is good for anyone. Chris Froome would win the Tour de France on a 105 cassette. There's nothing wrong with 105, it works really well. When you're spending £6,500 and the bike's been labelled as Ultegra, don't give me 105 level components. The same I think with the disc rotors. Why am I spending £6,500 to get 105 disc rotors? Cannondale, stop being so tight. Secondly, the high mod Dura Ace disc, right? That retails in the UK for £9,000. Okay, £9,000. If we look at the Canyon Ultimate CF SLX, right, that is the flagship of the Canyon range. It's got the new SRAM ETAP on it. It's the SLX, so essentially it is a high mod equivalent. And in the UK, I can buy that for £5,500. So why does the SuperSix, the equivalent SuperSix, cost me an extra £3,500? What is the £3,500 for? I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Now, on the Canyon bike, you're getting the SRAM group set, which I think the retail is higher than a Shimano Dura Ace Di2 anyway. So why is the Canyon £3,500 more? I just don't understand it. You cannot tell me that that frame is worth £3,500 more when the cost for them from the Asia factory is probably about $400 US. I just cannot understand it. It's madness. You'd be mad to buy the top end £9,000 bike. I'm sorry, but you just would. You can't, anyone. The Canyon Ultimate CF SLX Disc 9.0 SL is as good as bike for anyone, right? Anyone worth their salt would win the Tour on that bike, okay? Anyone like Chris Froome would win the bloody Tour on a CAD 12 if you gave him a CAD 12. But why would you spend the extra money? I just don't know. I can't understand how they can charge. It's almost like they've just plucked that figure out of the air and it hasn't been worked up through costing and then just a retail margin. It's like they've done costing, then they've done a margin, and then they've just added another like 2,000 or 3,000 quid. It's mental. And what's worse, right, is the bike comes with a Power 2 Max power meter. Now I quite like that. I mean, it's already on the bike, but chances are if you're buying that sort of level of bike, you've got your own power meter or you've got a preferred power meter. So you're then stuck with this thing on the bike that you might not want to use. But let's say you do want to use it and you spent your £9,000 on the bike. The power meter, which is an NG Eco, which is actually Power 2 Max's cheapest power meter, not the top one, it's not activated. So you have to go and pay more. I don't know how many hundreds of euros it is, but you have to go and pay more to activate the power meter on your £9,000 bike. Now, why? Okay, now Cannondale said, don't worry, you're not paying for the power meter because you can pay for it after you've bought it through activation. Okay, so how does this model work? Power 2 Max aren't giving the hardware, which is, look, the expensive bit, the strain gauge bit, for free. They're not going to give Cannondale a load of free power meters just to put on their bike. So the cost of the power meter, as far as I can see, must be costed into the retail price of the bike. So actually you have paid for the power meter, maybe at trade cost, but you've already paid for it. And then you're paying for it again when you want to activate it. It's really, like, Cannondale is really muggy. How can they get away with it? You know, don't be fooled. You have paid for this power meter because it's in the price of the bike. Because Cannondale have bought the hardware. So, unless I'm wrong, maybe I haven't worked out the model, or I don't know how the model works, but I can't believe it's not activated or ready to go for that price when you can buy the Canyon for £5,500 and it's got basically a Quark power meter straight out of the box and it'll work. And the Quark power meter on those chain rings is probably one of the most reliable and accurate power meters you can get Yeah, it's baffling. But anyway, I think it will be a better bike than the old SuperSix. It's a shame the SuperSix has lost its identity. It will be more comfortable. It's got more tyre clearance. But the prices of the top ones are pretty baffling. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. A little bit of a rant there, but at the end, I do like Cannondales, but sometimes the decisions and things they do, it's just mind-boggling. But anyway, hopefully I'll get a chance to ride one. But cheers.